All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well today. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show where we look at last night's slate, see what went well, see what didn't go well, and then we'll dig into this freaking gigantic 14-game slate. It's going to be a long day, guys. There's going to be a lot of crazy news, a lot of crazy events. So get ready for it, strap in, and let's try to make some money, make it a good day. Speaking of good days, that's not what last night was. Last night was not a good night. Um, we got we got some things right. Like we had CJ McCollum, we had Jordan Clarkson, Laurie Markkinen. Oh, for those of you that don't know, what you see on the screen, this is the $100,000 winning lineup from last night. And so we had a lot of CJ McCollum, we had a lot of Jordan Clarkson, Laurie Markkinen. Those were the boring plays. Everyone did that. Walker Kessler was a leverage play for us. So, I mean, that piece was right. That's great. Bradley Beal, we had exposure to, but I was slightly under on him. So, that didn't really move the needle much. And Trey Murphy, I was pretty high on him too. So we got some pieces right, but not what really mattered. What really mattered was Jeremy Sachan, or however the heck you say that name, and Bradley and Malik Beasley. I was not on them. I've already back tested. I would have had to be very, 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 very overweight on them in comparison to the field to be successful. So yeah, last night was not going to be my night really in any world, but I know there were some guys who still had some success. So congrats to you all. Let's focus on this slate though. Get past the yesterday loss. We were on I was on a 2-game winning streak before that. So I feel like yesterday was like a nice reality check. I feel like sometimes it's like a nice little gut check. As soon as I feel like maybe I'm a little bit unstoppable, I learn I'm not, which is nice. Tattooed Freak. What up, fam? Good to see you, man. Thomas, good to see you in here too. I appreciate you guys for being here. After a loss, it's funny. I feel like I get less views when we have like a losing night, and then I also get less people messaging me. So it's always funny when we have like a losing night. It's kind of like a little bit of a calm before the storm. Because eventually we'll go on a winning streak again, and then everyone comes back and all the craziness starts all over again. But anyway, we don't have time to talk about that because this is a 14-game slate. To be honest, guys, Fridays are insane for me. So the pre-lock show will be at 4 p.m. today instead of the usual time at 5. Upper Slad will be on the pre-lock show today since I'm not really able to dig in as much as I would like to on these Friday slates. It's great that Upper Slad will be able to join to kind of provide another source of coach value on that show. That show's only for VIP members. To do that, click the link in the description and feel free to use the promo code BOB for a 10% discount. All right, now that we're through all that, we're actually going to dig through the slate. First things first, the first game on the slate is San Antonio Spurs against the Orlando Magic. Focusing on the injury news here. For the Spurs, we have Keldon Johnson TBD, which is pretty big news. And then we have Orlando Magic's. When it comes to their injury report, they have Wendell Carter Jr. available. Jalen Suggs is out. Gary Harris is available. Chuma Okeke is out. Jonathan Isaac is out. We've seen these guys be out for a long time, so it's not really anything too special. But there's definitely some potential value opportunities from the Orlando Magic side of things. So if Keldon Johnson is out, we've seen it over and over and over again that Devin Vassell is really the guy who benefits the absolute most. The problem is the Spurs are playing on a back-to-back. Devin Vassell, we're not really seeing him at a discount. So he's really, for me, purely a GPP high upside play. The Magic have actually been they haven't been as soft of a matchup as they have been historically. Like they've actually been playing teams pretty well. So in my mind, these are two bad teams facing each other. So I feel like it's relatively matchup neutral. Devin Vassell's shot is going to really have to be falling for him to make my lineups tonight. So I'm just not super excited about it, but worth looking into a little bit more, knowing that he'll be the guy if Keldon Johnson's out. If Keldon Johnson's in, I'm not really too excited about this spot for him. On the Orlando Magic side of things, like Wendell Carter Jr. being questionable, so that means he might be returning. He's been out for a while, so just his overall presence would make me slightly less interested in this team. You guys are gonna hate this, but as of right now, I'm open to going back to Markelle Fultz. I know he was god freaking awful. When was it? Wednesday, I think. But if you can't handle getting hurt over and over again, you shouldn't be playing DFS. So I'm down for it. At least as of right now, I would love for better value to open up, but if it doesn't, might be stuck with it. Chilo, good to see you, man. Yeah, you can definitely message me in Discord anytime, really, like even now. Jamie Dean Tran said, Josiah, I hope you and the family have a wonderful holiday. Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I hope you do as well. We have this gigantic slate, and we have football tomorrow. We have the tournament tactics show at 5 p.m. later today, so it's a busy time of year. But the good news about like the crazy amount of content today and the crazy amount of content tomorrow is that Sunday will be like a nice, peaceful day, hopefully, to just kind of turn the brain off a little bit. But guys, that's pretty much this team for me. I think you can take a shot on Paolo Banchero as well. He just has a ton of upside. We're not like getting him at a super discount or anything, but he's not absurdly expensive either. So he's just viable. Like not a spot I'm super excited about in general, just on a slate this size, but we can't ignore any team or any game on this slate because that's what most people will do. So let's try not to be like that. Next up, we have the 76ers against the Clippers. It's weird seeing the Clippers play in an early game, but I mean, it makes sense because they're playing in Philly on the East Coast. But we have John Wall, questionable as of right now on the injury report. That's the only injury that really matters for the Clippers right now. On the 76ers side of things, they're pretty healthy for the most part outside of Tyrese Maxey. So both of these teams are healthy, and on a 14-game slate where I'm sure we're going to have a ton of injury news, and we might even have some random news from this slate, I'm not extremely interested in these teams. The Clippers are a pretty good defensive team, ditto for the 76ers, so this is pretty much a fade spot for me. I think it's a viable strategy to take shots on some of the superstars here who still have a chance of a ceiling performance. So guys like Embiid, Harden, Paul George, maybe Leonard. Reggie Jackson is more interesting to me as well. If John Wall is out, I'll have more interest in Reggie Jackson. A lot of you guys know I'm a little bit of a sucker when it comes to Reggie Jackson. John Wall is a very high usage guy, but it's going to be hard for me to still get to Jackson with Paul George and Kawhi playing. They're also gigantic usage guys as well, so I doubt Reggie Jackson's the main beneficiary there. Thomas said, Fultz will be our new Kyrie. We will keep riding until he smashes. Yeah, exactly. And he's cheap. So I'm willing to do stuff like that on cheap guys. We'll see. We'll see where we actually land, but we'll go from there. OS said, isn't PG under projected? I don't think so. I mean, with Kawhi back, and given the matchup, I don't think 38 is bad. I'll dig into it a little bit deeper just to make sure I'm not missing anything, OS. Because, it's also always possible and viable. If Paul George is going to be this low owned, like he's definitely viable in this spot. I think it's just this slate is going to be so large, it's hard to pay 8,900 on a guy like Paul George when we'll just do kind of like a overall slate. Look, when you could also target some of these other guys, I'm not going to mention Bam's name yet because I know that triggers some people. But just looking at the other names around Paul George, there are guys who are in much better spots around that price tag. So Paul George is definitely viable from a GPP standpoint, like just like a one-off. But in general, this team isn't very exciting for me. It also has one of the lower totals on this slate. So that means for me, like, I'm not going to try to have a ton of guys from these games. Again, just one-offs. So Paul George is fine. Kawhi is fine, but probably not all in the same line. All right. Next up, we have the Boston Celtics against the Minnesota Timberwolves. This game is actually pretty interesting for me. We have Rudy Gobert questionable. Kyle Anderson is questionable. Jordan McLaughlin is out. Cat has been out for a while, so that doesn't really matter anymore. We've seen some interesting starting lineups with some of these injuries. Like I know when Slow-Mo was out, aka Kyle Anderson was out, Austin Rivers started in his place, and he actually played pretty well, which is rare for Austin Rivers. So I mean, I think that's a viable play. But of course, like on a slate like this, probably not one we'll have to have a ton of exposure to. But if we don't have a ton of injury news and it's just Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert, then I think it's more viable. Um, of course, we know what to do if Rudy Gobert is out at this point. We've seen that enough times. On the Celtics side of things, we have Marcus Smart probable. Robert Williams is questionable. Um, of course, like if Robert Williams ends up not playing today, I think that does benefit Al Horford. Uh, there's some more fringe plays, but I think I'll prefer to focus on Al Horford if Robert Williams is out. It would be an even better matchup if Williams is out and Rudy Gobert is out. I think Al Horford could go overlooked on a slate this size and would be a nice potential leverage play as long as he's not too popular. Um, the Timberwolves themselves are a team that I'm not super excited about. The Celtics are a pretty good defensive team. If Rudy Gobert is out, I'll feel like I have to have exposure to D'Angelo Russell in this spot just because he's only 7,200. The 9,200 price tag on Anthony Edwards is going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on in this matchup against the Celtics. It's just tough for these Timberwolves guys. I'll probably mostly only have exposure due to the injuries that might happen here. Tattooed Freak said, I know, damn it, Bam looks low owned in a great spot, but I personally never get Bam right. Yeah, it's weird. Like last year, Bam and I had an awful relationship, and I almost always had him wrong. But this year, it's been better. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been better. So I know a lot of guys hate Bam, but I feel like I've had some good slates with him as like a core play, but there's also been bad slates too. It's like that for a lot of players, but I think Bam might be one of the more volatile players that we have exposure to pretty often, and so it just hurts a little bit more to kind of pull the trigger on him. Jamie said, I hate it when coaches says a player is on minute restrictions and I end up coming off the player. And then, yeah, you didn't say this part, but then that guy sees no minute restriction and you're like, why did you even waste my time with that? I totally get it. It's frustrating. It's hard to trust coaches sometimes, but rule of thumb for me is usually like, I'll take them at their word. And if it bites me, it bites me. It sucks sometimes, but it happens. Dave said my Vanderbilt full fade worked. Now he's a lock tomorrow. Nice, man. Nice. I don't hate that philosophy. When you fade the right time, you're like, all right, time to get back on the train when everyone else gets off. That's not a bad strat at all. Outside of that, guys, I think we can move on. Interesting game, but pretty injury news dependent. This game is the Toronto Raptors against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We've seen I'll talk about the injury stuff. We have Gary Trent Jr. questionable for the Raptors. Kim Birch is questionable for the Raptors. On the Cleveland Cavaliers side of things, we have Evan Mobley questionable. Lamar Stevens is questionable. And then a lot of guys that don't matter are out. Okay, maybe Dean Wayne matters a little bit, but the rest of them don't matter a ton. If Evan Mobley's out, that's gigantic for guys like Jared Allen and Kevin Love. They would see huge increases if that's the case. Alternatively, on the other side of it, I think Pascal Siakam is viable. I'm more interested in having some exposure to him if Evan Mobley's out because that makes the matchup slightly easier. But Jared Allen is still a solid defender as well, so it's not the easiest matchup. Of course, if Gary Trent Jr. is out, then I'm more interested in guys like Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, maybe OG, maybe, but probably not. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've seen like kind of throughout the last few slates, like Siakam has really been overcoming a lot of these tough matchups. We were on, or at least like we are able to pinpoint it a little bit with like Embiid and things of that sort because he's done that he's done that at times historically, but still pretty tough to predict at this point. With that being said, like I think Siakam's viable, but if Mobley's healthy, I doubt it's a spot I'll have a ton of exposure to. All right, moving on. We have the Knicks against the. Oh, I missed it. Tattooed Freak said early. I'm thinking about going to my main man Dame tonight. Yeah, I'm usually on that Dame train. We'll get there though. Uh, Tattooed Freak said Siakam is another one. Trey and Embiid are a couple more that I never get right. Yeah, definitely a few of those names are just very volatile. All right, guys. Next up, we have the Knicks against the Bulls. I think so far the Hawks, Clint Capella is questionable. So, the Bulls. That was the Hawks. Let's find the Bulls. All right. With the Bulls, we have Alex Caruso out. Goran Dragic is probable. So that's interesting. We might see his return. So that definitely impacts the minutes of guys like Caruso, Ayo, Kobe White. Definitely some risk involved here. Well, Caruso's out. But Javonte Green is doubtful. Definitely some injury news that, if anything, kind of just makes me like slightly less interested. And some of these guys are relatively popular. So like, let's just move it to the Bulls. So it's weird because we have Caruso out. And so in theory, that is an increase in minutes for guys like Kobe White and Ayo. But what concerns me is that we have Caruso out, but now we have Dragic moving in. And I don't know how they're going to utilize Dragic. We saw at the start of this season, Dragic had some random ceiling performances, and then they kind of slowly started decreasing his minutes back down. So this is a spot I want to dig a little bit deeper into and just kind of see who's the guy that they're going to trust the most. I think at 4K and 3,400, if Kobe White and Ayo are going to see 30 minutes, they're really good value on this slate. My concern is I just need to dig deeper into the spot and see if I actually believe they're going to see 30 minutes if Dragic returns. Is interesting for sure. It's just a spot that I don't know how much I can trust the minutes there for them yet. On the next side of things, we have Quentin Grimes questionable. We've seen quickly do okay in these spots with Grimes out. He's probably the guy who has like the increase in safest, like his minute floor increases a good bit. So he becomes a little bit of a safer play at 4,900, which is why he's more viable in these spots. But this is going to be a game that we have a decent amount of exposure to on this slate. We're going to play guys like DeMar DeRozan. Like, that just makes sense against the Knicks. You can score on them inside the paint and close, you can score on them. So it's not really a team that I'm afraid to attack. Also, DeMar DeRozan, had a dud. It looks like he's probably going to be popular here again on this slate, which is a little bit surprising. I'm interested in seeing if that sticks. But something to keep an eye on for sure. Julius Randle has also been on a heater. He's been averaging 49.2 DraftKings points per game over the last 5 games. So he's been in great form. I have absolutely no concerns attacking with Julius Randle here either. So this is a game that I'm pretty interested in, that I like having exposure to. But I also have some like slight hesitations, if you guys can't tell, just around some of the Bulls players. But I'm more than happy to have some exposure to like Jalen Brunson at 7,100. He makes a ton of sense here. RJ Barrett, I don't know exactly how I feel. If Caruso out, I think that does help from a defensive standpoint. The matchup is going to be easier. So I do think that helps a lot of these guys as well. Mitchell Robinson is popping. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the matchup against Vucevic. And like, Vucevic isn't an outstanding defender, but I just want to make sure that the matchup presents well for him. So a lot to dig into there in this game. Next up, we have the Pistons at the Atlanta Hawks. Starting off with injury news. I touched on the Hawks a little early before, but Clint Capella is questionable. We know what that means. We saw it last time. When Clint Capella is out, Okongwu is still viable. John Collins has been starting, and Okongwu was coming off the bench, which was one reason I was less interested in Okongwu, because the minutes are still a concern for me. He has to be extremely efficient with those minutes to work out, but he's one of those guys that can be that efficient. So if Capella's out, we can definitely consider Okongwu. The Pistons are a team that we can attack from an offensive standpoint. They haven't been an awful defense, but they're not good either. So I have absolutely no concerns utilizing a lot of these players. When it comes to Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, kind of like you mentioned, Tattooed Freak, I am not a fan of really picking one or the other. I just kind of let the domination station decide for me when they're both healthy. Anything else? This is a big slate, guys. Like, there's a lot of games, and there's like injury concerns for every single game. So at least it's not like football this week where there's weather concerns for every single game. I think I'll probably take the injury concerns. Maybe it's close. All right, guys. So for the Bucks, we have Giannis is probable. Chris Middleton is doubtful. Giannis has performed pretty well against the Nets historically. The Nets have improved from a defensive standpoint. They're not a team that's easy to attack anymore. But I still like Giannis in the spot. It wouldn't shock me if I utilize him as a leverage play here. It just makes a good bit of sense for me, in my mind at least. It's still early, but I like the spot. Thomas likes Durian and Ivy as well. Yeah, I totally overlooked the Pistons. And I think Bogdanovich, high usage player. He's always in play here from a GPP standpoint. Killian Hayes, Ivy, I agree with. I think they're viable here as well. I'm not on the Duran train as much, but his minutes are trending, like in the right direction, slowly but surely. He's been pretty efficient over the last few games, so I get it, and I don't hate it. We'll see what happens on the pre-lock show. You guys might get me on board with the Duran play. The past couple of games against New York, Trae Young is no longer the villain, just a crybaby. LOL. Yeah, like I didn't even. Yeah, like Trae Young, like when he faces the Knicks, like it used to be like a fun challenge we were all excited about, and now it's just like, all right, Trae, you're not that guy. You're just not that guy. The only problem with Detroit is, he never gives these. Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. Like, there's some guys who see more consistent minutes, but I kind of treat the Pistons like I do the Thunder. Like, they're rarely guys that I'm super high on. Like, I usually have exposure to them due to the DS, and they're usually decent value. So they're just like lineup fillers for me, but it's very rare. Like, they're going to be a leverage play for me outside of that Hayes streak I was on for a little bit a few weeks back. But it's rare that happens. I do like Bogdanovich though. But for the most part, just let the DS decide my fate on guys like that. On the other side of this game, we have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I struggle to play them in tough matchups. I usually like to try to play them in softer matchups. They're also just kind of hard to pick between when this team is pretty healthy. So not my favorite spot for these Bucks guys. If it was like gun to head, make a choice, like I would probably choose KD, but not my favorite plays, to be honest with you guys. Thomas said, don't talk about my guy Trae Young like that. I'm sorry. It had to be said. I mean, they're probably going to be a playoff team. So, I mean, at least you guys have that for you. Going for you. Jamie said, yeah, they're only good on a 2 to 3 game slate. That is so true. And honestly, I'm thankful for that. Like, I would rather teams that I don't like play really turn it up on a 2 to 3 game slate, because that's usually when I'm more open to playing them or like forcing exposure to them. In particular, I'm mostly talking about Bogdanovich here. I'm just a big fan of both of them these days. Outside of like the big name guys, Ben Simmons, Claxton are priced similarly. They're not particularly standing out. Again, this team's just very healthy. I like attacking the Nets when they're missing a guy. It's just a better spot for me. Also, Chris Middleton, when he's out, Giannis has a 38.9% usage rate. That's not really wild for a guy who's 12,200, but it's still really good. And so, yeah, just one more reason why I like him today on this slate. Next up, we have the Pacers against the Miami Heat. Let's find the notes. Tyrese Halliburton is questionable. Aaron Nesmith is questionable for the Pacers. On the Miami Heat side of things, pretty long list per usual. Jimmy Butler's probable, so that's good. Looks like he'll play. Kyle Lowry was not on the injury report, so it looks like he'll play. Caleb Martin, questionable. Gabe Vincent, questionable. Dwayne Dedmon, probable. Haslam, questionable. And then Yurtsman has been out for a while. This team is looking healthier from the Miami Heat side of things. Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent being out is important because Caleb Martin does see a decent amount of minutes. Gabe Vincent, not as much. But still, them being out would benefit guys like Strus and Oladipo just to see a few more minutes. So I would be slightly more interested in them if we see guys like Martin out in particular. But I think Gabe Vincent would help me be slightly more interested in those two as well. So potential leverage plays there depending on the injury news. I kind of like those spots. We talked about Bam a little bit. There's like a 85% chance he's a leverage play for me today. I've been doing it all season and it works out more often than it doesn't. You can attack this Indiana Pacers front court with bigs. We've been doing it for a while and we can still do it again. And hopefully it works out with Bam. There's not anyone that's going to be out that's going to really benefit him a ton from like a usage standpoint, but it's really the matchup that I'm attacking and the low ownership. Which, to be honest, guys, everyone's, for the most part, is going to have low ownership on a slate this size. It won't take much to get different. OS said, is there going to be a pre-lock show for Christmas NBA slate? Also, what time is pre-lock today? The pre-lock show is going to be at 4 p.m. today, Eastern time. Upper Slad will be joining, which is nice. And then for Christmas, there won't be a pre-lock show. Honestly, Christmas has not been my best slate for the last 2 years. So you guys probably don't want my advice when it comes to Christmas Day slates. But if I do get really bored and decide to play, I'll definitely still post like a core play of what I'm doing on that slate. We the people said don't need much leverage on a massive 14-game ownership. On a 14-gamer, ownership will be spread out. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I like about large slates is that my leverage plays don't become core plays. I really don't like when that happens. Like last night when ownership is so high, like if you're trying to get real leverage on a guy, they're going to become core plays. You don't have to play it that way, but that's just the way I do. And so when Jimmy Butler's 1% owned and pretty much everyone's 1% owned, I can do like, okay, 10%. That's nice leverage on a guy that I really like on a slate. Tattooed Freak said, well, we can do the opposite of you on Christmas. That's actually a really good point. Like if I just did a show and told everyone, this is what I'm doing. And then you guys were like, okay, he sucks on Christmas. So let's do the opposite. That's not unsmart. Actually, there used to be a show that was for like another website and stuff like that. And there was a guy that I really did watch his show just to do the opposite of what he did. So if someone does that for me, I wouldn't be upset, but that sometimes makes sense. I think that's really it. I mean, I think Bam's really the guy that I'm most excited about. Of course, like if Halliburton's out, then guys like Mathurin, their usage rate increases a ton. Miles Turner, his usage rate increases a ton. I don't love the matchup against the Miami Heat. They're a good defense, so I'm not looking to target the Pacers on this slate. But if Halliburton's out and if Nesmith is out, then I would have to. So hopefully they play. So I don't have to worry about it. But we know how these slates go. Next, we have the Pelicans at the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is a fun one. We have Zion Williamson TBD. Larry Nance is TBD. We saw last night McCollum went off. He did well. He scored 40 points, had 8 rebounds. He had 9 assists. Like he was trying to go for a triple-double, but was so close, but yet so far. And he led the Pelicans with a 34.4% usage rate. When we were talking about that Giannis, I think he was at 38 or something. And then you see CJ McCollum for like 4,000 less. That's tough to bite. You know, that's why Giannis isn't as popular and CJ has a little bit of ownership on him. Another guy that's going to be popular on this slate is a guy that was popular yesterday who did not come through for us, Joe Val. Uh, uh, he's going to be pretty popular on this slate, and honestly, I'm totally fine going back there. I know a lot of people are going to be like, no, I can't do it, but guys, the Thunder suck. The minutes are always a concern for Jonas Valanciunas, but I don't care enough. I'm willing to attack it again and probably get leverage on it. Like, he's not that popular where I feel like I shouldn't. On the Oklahoma City Thunder side of things, there aren't really too many injuries that matter. Like, there's G League guys out, some names, no names, so nothing really too crazy. They're relatively healthy here. The only two guys I'm interested in having exposure to is SGA and Josh Giddey. I don't like attacking the Pelicans. They're a good defensive team, but if this game's going to stay close, then I think SGA and or Giddey will be a pretty big part of it. So they're on my radar as of right now as potential leverage plays, but I'm not completely sold on it because, again, I don't like playing guys against the Pelicans. Of course, I always mention Poku just because he has a ton of upside and is always viable if the coach decides to give him minutes. So just another guy I always keep on my radar. Trey Murphy as well. If Zion is out, I always make sure I have exposure to him. He's one of my favorite, just a guy I like having exposure to, but it's also nice that he performs well in these spots when Zion's out. Jose Alvarado's popping as a good value play on this slate. To be honest with you guys, I think we'll get better value. For now, I'll be okay with it. I like Alvarado. He has a relatively safe minute floor for his price, so it makes a lot of sense. But, don't love the ownership on him. And I think with the right injury news, we can get better plays. Okay, guys, 5 more games. We're running a little bit over time, so got to try to speed things up a little bit. Next up, we have the Dallas Mavericks against the Houston Rockets. This is another interesting game. For the Rockets, Eric Gordon's out. Garrison Matthews is questionable. Josh Christopher is available. Jason Tate is out still. Dallas Mavericks, DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith is out. Kemba Walker's out. Josh Green is still out. And Kleba is still out. The Kleba piece is what I care about, and it's really the only thing I care about. DFS matters too. He's important. But Kleba means that Wood is more viable and his minutes are more secure. This is also a revenge game for Christian Wood. We've already saw him, his first big game of the season, if I'm remembering correctly, was actually against the Rockets, but it was in Dallas. This is the first time Christian Wood is playing in Houston, I believe. You guys let me know if I'm wrong about that. And although the matchup doesn't look fantastic on paper, I like the spot. I mean, I'm a sucker when it comes to a good narrative, so I'll at least match the field on him. I am totally open to him being a leverage play if I can find a good enough reasons for it. So I'll dig into the sim model once that gets updated, and just kind of dig deeper into make sure that those minutes are secure and seeing if the matchup's really as tough as it looks. Just like from looking at this, I don't believe it is. So I'm really liking the potential of a Christian Wood leverage play today. You can, of course, take into consideration guys like KJ and Terry Eason with Eric Gordon out. We saw last time KJ started and then Terry Eason came off the bench. I am sure Upper Slide is going to be all over Eason on the pre-lock show later today. So I don't hate that, but I do like KJ Martin a little bit better. I'll have exposure to both. They're both going to pop for everyone. If we get injury news and there's other 3K value, I wouldn't be against pivoting off of this. A lot of you guys know I don't love playing guys against the Dallas Mavericks. They play at a very slow pace because of Luka Doncic. So, not my favorite spot, but the Rockets are a decent matchup, so I think we can still take shots on both sides. Tattooed Freak said, gotta get ready for Cancer Center appointment. I'll see everybody this afternoon, and Merry Christmas, everybody. If I don't see you again before then, hey, I hope everything goes well at the appointment, and I hope you have a great Merry Christmas as well, man. Talk to you later. All right, guys. I believe that's everything for this game. I don't think there's any more missing pieces. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is always a little sneaky. Don't hate that play. But I think a lot of us will have exposure to this game, even though the total's actually pretty low. Huh. I think for me, I like Christian Wood here. And again, I'm open to KJ and Eason. And then I'm open to some shots on Dinwiddie and Hardaway, but I doubt I'll have a ton of exposure to like KPJ and Jalen Green. Not my favorite plays on this slate. Maybe one, but not both for sure. All right. Next up, we have another crazy game. We have the Nuggets against the Portland Trailblazers. The Trailblazers have a pretty long list of probable guys. They have Damian Lillard, probable, Nurkic, probable, Josh Hart, probable, Drew Eubanks, probable, Winslow, doubtful. Nurkic did see a minutes limit on Wednesday. He was around 22 minutes. He was sidelined with a little bit of a sore calf. It seems like he's probably going to be fine, but clearly Nurkic isn't my favorite play here. He has had some strong performances against Jokic in the past. So if you foresee Nurkic surpassing that limit and you don't think that's going to be there, then there is some potential upside, especially at that $6,400 price tag. I get it. I am worried about the injury, though, a little bit and him not seeing more minutes. So I don't think I'll be on that train, but could be talked into it. Jamal Murray is questionable. That's big news. Michael Porter Jr. said he will play. So for me, as a lot of you guys know, if Jokic, Jamal Murray, MPJ, and Aaron Gordon are all healthy, I'm not as interested in them. Especially at these price tags, not my favorite play. If Jamal Murray is out, or if MPJ is out, then I'm definitely more interested in getting exposure to the star players here. I would have Jokic exposure. I would have Murray exposure. I would have Porter exposure, whichever one ends up playing. And of course, Aaron Gordon would be more viable for me as well. On the other side of this game, the Trailblazers, we can attack the Nuggets with point guards. The other day, was it John Morant or SGA who were facing the Nuggets? I saw them put Aaron Gordon on the stud point guard. And that was slightly concerning for me. I need to dig a little bit deeper and see how often they're doing that, because that would make the matchup tougher for Damian Lillard. But at least as of right now, I'm not overly concerned about the switches, and I still like Damian Lillard's upside. He always goes under-owned, and he has high upside games pretty often. I don't get it, but it's fine. All right, guys, 3 more games. Next up, we have the Memphis Grizzlies against the Phoenix Suns. Desmond Bane is questionable, so he might be coming back. We haven't seen this team healthy in a really long time. And with that being said, if they're healthy, I'm not really interested in them. If they're out, they're slightly more viable. It's still a matchup against the Suns, so not my favorite thing. But of course, like, Ja Morant's viable here. Jaren Jackson Jr. is viable here. Those are really the main 2 guys. I mean, I think you can look at Steven Adams, but I think there's a lot of really good center plays on this slate. So Steven Adams doesn't usually see a ton of minute upside, so I'm less excited to play him. So it's just one of those things. OS said, would Jamal Murray be a potential leverage play? With him being questionable, I'm not really in the game of predicting if a guy is going to play or not, but if he plays and it sounds like MPJ plays, that means everyone's healthy, and so I'm less excited to have exposure to them. If MPJ is out, then yes, Jamal Murray would be a potential leverage play, but since MPJ said he's going to play, who knows if we can actually trust that, then it's going to be tough for me to have Murray be a leverage play. Devin Booker is out for the Suns. Chris Paul was not on the injury report. Cam Payne is still out. The guys who see the biggest positive usage increase when Booker is out is DeAndre Ayton, then Chris Paul, And over the last 2 games, Landry Shamet and Mikal Bridges. I don't know if I trust Shamet yet. I mean, we've seen Shamet have big games, or we've seen Damian Lee have big games. We've seen some other names do well. So I'm not really trying to force in those guys, at least not yet. For me, the main guys that I have interest in here are still Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges. So that's how I'm treating it. If anything, I have more interest in Damian Lee as a potential leverage play just because everyone's mad at him for doing poorly last time out. But he's had ceiling performances in these spots before, so I'm not really overly concerned about it. So I have him highlighted. And of course, I still have Shamet highlighted as well as making sure I'm not missing a spot that we should be going back to. No one else really is standing out for me. All right, 2 more left. Next up, we have the Washington Wizards against the Sacramento Kings. For the Wizards, they're playing on a back-to-back. Porzingis is TBD. Denny Avdija is TBD. Delon Wright is TBD. There's always a chance on a back-to-back that some random might end up missing time as well, so definitely be on the lookout for that. The guys, of course, who benefit the most with Porzingis out are Bradley Beal and Kyle Kuzma. The matchup isn't awful. I don't hate attacking the Kings, even though they've, of course, improved this season slightly. I would be more interested in Sabonis. Easier matchup with Porzingis out. But I think primarily it would be between Kyle Kuzma and Bradley Beal for me as guys that I want exposure to. We've seen Denny Avdija perform well here too. He's questionable, so it's a little bit harder for me to figure out where I want to go from that standpoint. Gafford was god-awful last night, so I don't know how I feel about going back there, but I would consider it. Will Barton's slightly interesting if Avdija ends up being out, but I doubt I'll get there on a slate this size. That's a little bit too cute for me. I do actually like Keegan Murray today, believe it or not. And it's really just his price tag. 4,900, I feel like is a little bit too cheap for a guy that's seeing 30 minutes. He's not doing a ton with those minutes, but we've seen him have some breakout slates. So potential leverage play for me. Guy that I like a good bit. So definitely some pieces from this game, but not like my favorite game ever. Next up, we do have a game that I do like a good bit. Unfortunately, it's a game that I think a lot of people like a lot. We have the Charlotte Hornets against the Los Angeles Lakers. The Hornets have Terry Rozier questionable, Dennis Smith Jr. questionable. The Lakers have LeBron James probable. Russell Westbrook is probable, so he's returning, potentially, more than likely. Austin Reeves is questionable, and of course, AD is still out. Juan Toscano-Anderson is still out. The Lakers are not a good defense anymore. I mean, they were decent for a little bit there when AD was kind of starting to get back into things, but they're really bad without AD. They weren't great with them, but they're really bad without him. The Charlotte Hornets are also a really bad defense. So it's kind of like the perfect situation where we can have plenty of exposure to LeBron James. You can attack the Lakers with guards and bigs now. So these are just 2 bad defensive teams. And it's also the hammer game, which a lot of you guys know I love having exposure to. So for me, I will have plenty of exposure to LeBron James. I'll at least be matching the field on him. LaMelo Ball, very, very likely that he'll be a leverage play for me. I like Russell Westbrook in this spot as well. I think Kelly Oubre is viable, more so if Terry Rozier is out. I don't know if we'll get that news in time, so that's worrisome. Thomas Bryant is the big that we can play against the Hornets. Very likely he's a leverage play as well. So a lot of my leverage plays are probably going to come from this game. So by far one of my favorite games on the slate. I think you can even take shots on guys like Mason Plumlee here. I don't think we'll have to get that cute on this slate because I think we'll have some better center values and just some guys that we'll want to pay up for, like Bam. But we'll see how things go from that standpoint. But guys, I appreciate y'all for sticking with me. Those of you who were able to join for a little bit and hop out, appreciate y'all as well. Look forward to seeing you guys on the pre-lock show later today at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you guys again for watching and look forward to seeing y'all later.